Yo, 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 what is going on, IK Familia? It is your boy BN, aka Mr. Kingdom Builder, and today we are back to give you arguably probably the biggest update in IK's history so far, which is the developer meeting. So it happened today on March 23rd. It went for a little over 3 hours, and we're going to give you pretty much an audio verbal transcript just because I can't show you any screenshots or video, but we can talk about and I can let you know up to everything that was shared and discussed in the actual server that we did get permission to talk about. So I'm going to give you everything you want to know. We're going to go over the overview. I'm going to let you know what the format was, what the actual structure was, what was the outline throughout the meeting, what were all the questions that were asked, give you overviews of the responses, things that we suggested and provided feedback on, questions we asked on ourselves, and then I'll give you at the end my conclusion, my just objective thoughts and opinion on how I felt the meeting overall went. So there's going to be a lot that we talk about. I'm also going to have timestamps in the video down below, just so you can know what major areas that are focused on throughout this video. Okay, so first and foremost, let me get the big stuff out of the way, which is, one, I want to give a huge thank you to the IK team. There were multiple employees that showed up, and let me see how many exactly. I think there was 5. I think that is, let me double check here. Yeah, so there was 5 employees that showed up, and there was 3 mods that were there as well, right? So we had about a total of 8 people representing game staff between employees and mods that did show up to the meeting. Again, there were before I even get there, again, I cannot say thank you enough. I think the opportunity to meet and sit down with them, I will say this, this is not something, you look at the basic relationship between a player and game staff, right? Let alone employees, right? More so mod staff. It sometimes can be a two-way street, but more often than not, it's usually a one-way street, right? Where you give your feedback, your suggestions, you report things, and then they kind of take that, maybe filter it, and then kind of work its way up the chain. Where we had an actual opportunity to sit down with the game's development team, members of the game's development team, along with some mods there, having these types of opportunities should not go unnoticed, and I think uncredited. So for me, and obviously on behalf of the other representatives that were there, it was, we thank you, and hopefully we can continue these going forward as well in any capacity. As I actually thought, and I'll give a brief moment here, I thought, I will say that before I get to my real true conclusions here, the meeting, in my opinion, did go better than even I expected, as far as all-encompassing, right? And I'll get to specifics at the end of the video. Okay. With that out of the way, let me tell you first off the 6 representatives that showed up. So the 6 reps, because this part I can tell you, were myself, was Ray, Shunhua. I'm butchering that so bad, but it's Chunhua. And then we had Jetstar, of course, Lily Lay, and I think it was Kaneki was the other one, I believe. Let me just double check here. I'm pretty sure that's who it was. Kaneki, yes. Okay. So, and then there was Kaneki. Now, those are the 6 reps that were focused, right? This is different than what I said before because, again, there just wasn't an announcement on who the actual reps were going to be, and if that was mentioned somewhere on the server, it was just kind of lost in the chat history. So I think an area of improvement for the next meeting is just have an announcement channel there, right? And then they can just let us know, like, hey, here's the details. They did that in some channels, but just in some pieces of the information would have been nice, so I would have been able to see that, and everyone else just kind of in a one-stop shop place. But those were the 6 reps that participated in the discussion. So it's less than I thought, which at the end of the day, I thought went well based on pretty much everything being able to be completed, so to speak, based on the amount of time that we had. Okay, now, let me get a sip of water because this is going to be where we kind of start diving into some of the things. So the overview of the meeting was that we were going to have, and this is kind of the overview outline, if you will, format. I'll kind of include all this in one. So at the start of the meeting, right, there was about 20 minutes or so where we had an introduction, both sides introduced, Possibly some basic questions were asked, but it was more of an introduction from our side. I don't know if I don't think we got an introduction from their side. That would have been great, just so we maybe knew who they were, maybe what department they worked in, maybe something that could be done the next meeting if one was to happen. So not sure if it was just forgetful or maybe just trying to save time, but I know we had an opportunity to introduce ourselves as the 6 reps, and then we moved on to what changes has the game made, right? So we had one of the employee reps kind of went into their overview of what they've been doing so far on their end to not only address things, but to make sure they're kind of staying on top of the important items that community brings up and things that they notice as well. And then also talking about, and then next, that only lasted maybe 5-10 minutes. And then next they talked about a new function. And this is essentially kind of the new feature that they introduced. And this is where I'll kind of be scrolling up, or I should say down, from the beginning of the meeting. So one of the things after we all introduced ourselves and they got through letting us know, or got past that next portion of talking about some of the areas, right? They talked about when IK launched, how they received some advice on things that they were aware of, right? Changing some things like the trove, adding in the purify queues, so that way you could, still be later on. What's the word I'm looking for? So you could purify a chest even while one was being researched, right, or unlocked. Doing things like trying to improve the KVK experience, obviously after getting feedback, we've seen one big adjustment of a few things or one improvement area of a few things so far. I'm talking about things like the PvP gameplay that some people were concerned about, trying to improve and optimize battle reports, which we know they did. Adding in a few new features for lords, for example, kind of getting special gifts, and obviously doing the relic exploration, which they eventually expanded on, right? So now once you kind of get past doing all 3 levels of ruins exploration in game, you now get the special ruins, right, that shows up, right, where you basically kind of get unlimited hints, so to speak. I still have to complete my puzzle pieces, don't judge me. And then and then here is where we get to right, they're talking about kind of like in the following versions, right, over the next several months. One of the big things they told us that they're going to be including, and this is something we can announce, is they are going to be adding in an Illusion Battlefield tournament format. Now, there's not obviously a lot of details that were provided outside of that. It is something that is going to come in. Something else that was noted as well before we kind of get into the feedback there, because we did ask some questions and provide some feedback. And again, I'll read through those more or less quickly and give you guys some TLDRs as best I can. Thanks, Ghost, for watching me, Dad. Is that they mentioned the IB tournament, and then they also mentioned that they have been noticing some of the difficulties in acknowledging this when it comes to player migration, by how there's usually very small windows. There's a lot of overlapping things that happen that create these small windows, one of those being Throne of the Supreme, right? How you can't really migrate out if you're past or if you're within a certain stage of TOTS, and being able to kind of make the power limitation a little more reasonable. So this is something they addressed, and I think the hope there is that they may try to look at opening or I should say removing some of those hurdles that create limitations and smaller windows for migration to happen on for kingdoms. I actually think it's something that should happen, but I'm more of the opinion I just think it's super simple. Just don't have any just don't have any additional restrictions beyond what the kingdom's restrictions are. Right, allow for anyone to migrate out at any time. If they're in Throne of the Supreme, if they're in KVK, right? Maybe with the exception of if they're doing like an hour Illusion Battlefield match, that's different. But maybe if it's before a registration window or something like that, or even if it's before the match starts, right? Then you can just use a sub of someone. Like the challenge is that migration has to be something that is really truly free for anyone to leave at pretty much 99% out of any time. right, in a kingdom's lifespan for anything that could happen, and then you just go off of what the kingdom's restrictions is. That way, it's less hoops to jump through, less to manage on their part, and it would actually, in my opinion, save them time and allow for those resources to be used elsewhere. For one of the other things that was mentioned is that for players that were concerned about the battle report, they'll also it looks like they mentioned improving that to kind of make the experience better. I don't know if there's going to be any additional improvements there, but I know they did acknowledge that was something that was addressed and they worked on, which we did ended up seeing. Okay, now we kind of get to the questions revolving IB tournament, right? So these are some of the feedback that some of the people gave, and I'll just kind of read through some of these as kind of a quick top-down, right? So Lily mentioned about with the IB League coming up, had mentioned, would it be impossible to stop locking in players in their respective alliances after being registered? We ended up having one of the other employees, right? This is the second one to talk now, mentioning that players can still change alliance after being registered, right? So that was a response that we got for that answer. Jez came in, talked about being super excited for IB tournaments, and really just provided some good feedback there. Then we ended up having, let me see here. Okay, so Ray had asked, looking for some more information on how matchmaking works, right? Can we get more information about how that'll work and just kind of matchmaking processes? This was something I also followed up with as well. But in response, Liam, here, where is it? So we had, okay. And then it looks like one of the responses there was that when the IB tournament starts, you can have normal IB and IB tournament almost every week. So the frequency of IB, it looks like, from what they're saying, may be raised. And then, which is pretty big, right? I'm really of the opinion where I feel personally that having IB every 2 weeks is great. Too much of a good thing, you can often drown yourself out in, right? There has to be, in my opinion, some level of moderation and in between time, right? This is the thing. If you think that IB is like, here's a good example. If you think IB does not happen enough, right? Even though it happens every 2 weeks, if it starts to happen every week, you have to really think about all the planning that goes into IB, right? It's not just IB is going to happen every week. You have to think about how does it start when you plan out, even before you get into the match. You have to take a head count. You have to update your strategies. You have to come up with a strategy. You have to inform everyone of that. You have to set aside time if maybe you guys want to practice certain things, right? Who knows if that may be something that comes out, right, for practice matches. You have to then maybe get on voice and set time aside to maybe do some pre-discussions. Then you have to actually go and do the prep before the match starts and then get into your calls before that while the match is going on, right? Again, there are certain steps you have to take, which takes time away from what you may do within your alliance, right? So my heat of caution is, sure, maybe it sounds great to do it once a week. And I would say at most, it might be better just to test it out. Like just say, hey, for 1 month, we're going to test out how doing it once a week is, instead of just hardcore committing to the change, right? I think it's very important that we trial and error test some certain things. And in something like this, it's okay to do that. But committing to it and saying we're going to do it every week, right? I mean, there's a reason why you look at other kingdom builders and they don't do weekly AVA matches. Right, there is method to the madness, so to speak. So for me, in my opinion, right, I love that they do it every 2 weeks. I think it's a good balance there. But again, I think an appropriate stage, and this just depends on what they do going forward, I think an appropriate view on looking at it is potentially do a trial period. Do it for a month and say, hey, in this month we're going to do it every week to see how it goes, and then gauge overall feedback. Okay, and then we kind of get to my question, along with Ray's, because it was kind of combined, right? So I had asked about that global game-wide ranking system, asking about eventually added to show like something like, for example, would there be a global game-wide ranking system that would eventually show win-losses? Would it show match report summaries? Other metrics for the alliances that participate in IB, right? Because if you think about it, No one knows what the actual rankings are for IB. No one knows what the rankings are for KVK. Having some kind of a global leaderboard that shows you a couple different metrics, not just win-losses, because, again, those can be impartial to summarizing maybe the full context, right? The match could have been extremely close and could have went either way, right? You could have captured all the cities, but let another kingdom capture the gnome capital, and then the impression is that they won KVK. So I think it's important to show different metrics, and these are some examples of things that could be shown. So I added on to what Ray had initially asked, but just expanded a little bit. And then the second thing I asked was about global spectators, right? Is there an opportunity to have global spectators watching matches, not just the players that are in your alliance, but having other people watch matches? Because this would open it up to make I think, allowing for people to watch in-game matches is a fantastic thing to do, because it can increase the engagement level of Illusion Battlefield, even potentially of KVKs as well. And then on top of that, it can allow for people to do things like streaming, shoutcasting, commentating, right? Maybe analysis of matches. Right now, you're kind of opening up the content sphere a lot more to bolster up the visibility that is Illusion Battlefield, and you can promote this feature a little bit more widespread throughout the community and the player base. So the response that we got there was, let me see here. You realize that whole weekend. Okay, so, and then it looks like one of them responded to Lily, just kind of double clarifying here about locking in the alliance, saying like after you attend the battle, sign in, you can leave the alliance, not the whole weekend. And then I got a response here saying for the first question, right, it looks like they will have, so they did mention they're going to have, or planning, right? Let me leave these open-ended. They're planning to have a game-wide ranking board letting all servers know how the tournament is going, right? So that is nice to know. Now, I don't know if it's going to be separate. For example, if it's going to be based on the current ranking system for all IB matches that are going, or if it's only going to happen during the IB tournament. I would love for there to be a global leaderboard, even now, currently, to show that for not only IB and KVK, but just multiple metrics fields, or columns, if you will. And so when I asked about the global spectators, right, one of them responded back. They said it's a good suggestion. They're going to take it into consideration, but they just don't have it planned as of now, which is completely understandable. Okay, then we get to the next question here, which is, what's your biggest motivation for playing Infinity Kingdom, right? This was their first question that they had asked. And then, so some people had asked, again, the social engagement, being able to communicate with your alliance members. Some people mentioned about Illusion Battlefield being their favorite part. The community, right, that they build within their kingdom. Some people, of course, mentioned KVK, things that have to kind of do with cross-server game modes. We had people saying that they just like progressing in the game and kind of going through the standard building functions. Now, I had mentioned that I loved everything that costed action points. I thought this was one of the biggest features, and many of you have heard me talk about this, that really got me into the game compared to when I was playing another Kingdom Builder. And so, right, obviously this is albeit the recent Alliance tech changes, right, of being able to arguably have that AP cost 0 when attacking cities. I effortlessly do not agree with that. Because it just backtracks on kind of what that initial standard was and so to speak, the promises that were set. So for me, again, even though for the most part, pretty much everything still does cost action points, but again, reducing the stuff on the cities, I don't know, in my opinion, you still kind of cut that in half because, obviously you're going to spend AP on attacking gnomes, bosses, etc. But when it comes to attacking PvP players, right, that'll obviously still cost AP. But outside of that, it was either you're spending your AP on attacking players or attacking cities, outside of events or things that you would do outside of those two major areas. So for me, kind of cutting that really in half is very hard to take in, because it was one of the most important things that I felt made IK stand out above all the other Kingdom Builders. The number two thing that I really loved is the training grounds. I love how they limit troop capacities, so it's not something that people can kind of just run away with when it comes to when it comes to just having 1 million or 2 million troops trained up, right? And in order to really feel as though you're impacting someone on, zeroing or having some kind of some gratifying win on maybe a whale player, someone bigger, or someone that you're happy to kind of see get zeroed, or even just being able to zero someone in general, right, in kind of a pure zeroing sense of dead troops, right, where they kind of have to train everything back up from scratch. That part is what I really like. Another thing I like about the game is that they limit the amount of troops that you can make, right? So it's something that you kind of have to always be doing, right? You can't really make 1 million and then just chill and never build any more for a while. So I like that. And then I think third for me, which is similar to others, right? I think the community is what I think most of us log in for every day. And though content features and modes will come and go, right? I think my biggest enjoyment amongst others is that socialization. The camaraderie you're able to kind of build with players and friends every day. And then another one here from Ray had mentioned about the group started to play with, something that is grateful for, right, to kind of meet and to meet a lot of the people that they have met, and then obviously content things such as IB, KVK. The second question that was asked is, I see most of you mentioned IB as a favorite part. So in the IB, which part makes you feel should be fixed or improved immediately most, right? Or just most immediately. So essentially, what kind of improvements? So Jez chimed in saying, felt like battle reports was the biggest thing, saying a very large percentage of those are unreadable, just kind of flawed in their own ways. He said he'd love to be able to read some battle reports like they do arena reports. Everything else about it, he said he really enjoys. Feels the time as well. We had Chua said something about matchmaking for tiers of troops and the amount of people with them in the battlefield. I know this was something that someone told me before, where there was something that had came up. They had an IB match against an alliance in a kingdom that was already in a more progressed or a farther season than them. So they were facing Castle 40s while they only had the Castle 50s or up to 50s, and they only had up to 40 limits. So I think that's obviously a big concern, right? I mean, even me, I would have imagined that would have been something that would have been factored into IB matchmaking, where you're not going up against people like that. Which again, if you think about it, that could be something that maybe it wasn't considered at the time. Maybe it just wasn't thought of as a potential, I don't want to say drawback, but a challenge that could have arisen from raising the levels. Not only from raising the levels, but limiting the levels, so to speak. Because, there could be situations where you have a kingdom and some players already get to Castle 40, but they can't advance to higher than that because of the season, right? Cap restrictions. So that's just something to consider about as well. And I imagine that's, for the most part, probably an easy code or something that can be fixed. And then we had Lily, who mentioned, right, she'd love to see some alliance talents as well, right? Things like buff and debuff, similar to kind of alliance tactics in KVK. Actually, that was a good idea. Would it be possible to reduce the cost of healing speedups? This is something that was mentioned a few times as well. Marching speedups and kind of instant recall to half. Saying something like 50 gems for instant recall, right, instead of kind of 100 for IB, which would really not only promote the usage of them more, but probably the viability of considering to use them more as well. Things like IB League bundles was mentioned, right, where maybe they're really they're specific just for that. Marching speed ups, instant recall, healing speed ups. I actually thought that was a great idea. I believe that, and then we had Kaneki came in, right, saying some of the concerns here for IB was fixed. Some of the favorite game modes for a reason. A bit faster in relocation might make it more engaging. Perhaps a bit of construction reduction could help, right? So just trying to speed up maybe the pace of IB. Now, I will say I do not play IB, a lot. So for me, and I mean that like I've played 1 or 2 times, I think. So for me, I'm looking at it more on public perception from what I often hear and see. And so one of the things here is about, knowing how matches are set up, right? What is that matchmaking process? What do they consider? What are they actually using to factor in to gauge how matches are put together or just set up? So I think that's really important. Number 2, not allowing for any kingdom buffs. This is something I think Jez had mentioned as well, right? Not allowing for any kingdom buffs, for example, via cities, or king titles, right, that may be applied, because some have mentioned that these are, and specifically removing those from being applied to IB matches, right? So it just kind of creates more of a fair, even playing field. Now, this, of course, is outside of your alliance tech and your individual tech, pending the application there. But I think by doing those things, it makes it so you don't run into the challenges of going up against alliances that have the 15 best PvP city buffs in one alliance or two alliance-based servers, and you're noticing that there is a disadvantage there, right? I really believe that tactics and strategy should be the most important thing when you're looking at something like IB, right? Not necessarily who has the most additional buffs outside of what you can control. You can control your alliance tech, right? That's controllable. What's not controllable is, sacrificing the health of your server because you guys want to have one alliance that has the 15 best PvP buffs for IB. So I think that's important to address. I'm glad some other people mentioned it as well. Then we get to the second question here. Ray had provided, right, reducing healing cost as well was something. And something that I thought was really creative from Ray, which I give a hat off here, is talking about like having an IB shop. Similar to how we have COR shops and now a KVK shop. Having an IB shop for maybe specific things could actually promote. And let me be clear here. I don't believe that IB should have the most exclusive types of things, right? Because you are going to have players, remember, allowing for everyone to participate in KVK, you have over a month to do that. So every player has that opportunity. Not every player will have that same opportunity when you think about you only have an hour to play IB. And if you have to obviously play throughout the entire duration, that can be hard to expect the majority of players in the alliance, right? Because you have to also remember and keep in mind that you can't have everyone participating in IB for your team. And if you end up having a bunch of people, then you'll have to rotate teams, right? And that can cause challenges because if you're looking for consistency, right, in having people memorize your tactics and your strategies, if you're swapping teams too often, right, just because everyone's trying to get in to get the IB shop items. But I do like the idea of the IB shop. I just don't feel that the items really should be super exclusive, because that can create problems in and of itself. Okay, then we get here to the third question that was asked, which is, in your opinion, what is the most attractive part of KVK? And so this is kind of worse. This is kind of where you get like people are like, okay, do I give feedback or do I just say like, oh, what's the best? So a little bit mixed here. Excuse me. So Jess started off saying that, right, there's alliances that obviously take cities and gates. Like the trial season, felt it was really engaging. Opponents had battled daily. And then we have Chunhua, who had mentioned, right, most attractive part is working together with your servers, right, fighting other servers. Lily had mentioned kind of reducing the time, right, being, mentioned it does need a little bit of work, being 45 days worth of an event. And like the most about KVK, competing with the 7 other servers. But again, an important thing here that was mentioned is the matchmaking part. And saying that it kind of makes or breaks KVK right now. It's either too easy or too hard for some. I think that's appropriate. And then the last part here was the amount of effort put in versus the rewards given is also a bit lacking in my opinion. I don't think this is necessarily for the cities, but just for the other rewards outside of cities, the task completions, what you kind of get at the end. I think those are more of the reference points there. And then Kaneki had mentioned, KVK kind of being the inevitable and most attractive kind of end game event in a kingdom, which I think is appropriate. Fun because it kind of compares your efforts versus other kingdoms' efforts, right? So there's kind of somewhat bragging rights to an extent, even though it wasn't said. That's just my inference. The teamwork that we have had built, right, to kind of show those results off. Also mentioning that rewards could be a little bit more attractive there. Then I had mentioned being able to fight it out with servers and socialize with them in public chats. I think that's great. I mentioned about the vision mechanic with using thermal towers, which I think is a very kind of unique feature. It's not something I've usually seen in other kind of KVKs or SVSs for a few other kingdom builders I've played. So I like the idea of it just kind of being a unique element where you cannot just see everything immediately, right? So, then we talk about the KVK ranking system. So I love how when you go into KVK, right, it has its own ranking system where you can go up. You would go somewhere like here, and you'd go to ranking, and then it would show you the stats for all 8 kingdoms right there. You can look at what the alliance power is, the individual player powers from all the people there amongst those 8 kingdoms. I really love that. And I thought that was a great thing that they did. I'm sure they can maybe expand and build a little bit off of it, but I really like the information and I think the leaderboard columns that they currently have there. And then Ray had mentioned, being, again, working with the server, saying that kind of PvP plays that fundamental role in KVK. Again, mentioning the better matchmaking there for small servers versus small, big versus big, and other parts. Again, also mentioning the city rewards in addition was something that was really big. And then Lily had made a comment at the end, right, talking about like a server grading system. So this is something that I had mentioned as well, which kind of comes into the next part, which is question 4, right, where they get into which part don't you like most in KVK, which could have just been what improvements or fixes or feedback or suggestions do you have for KVK that we can use to improve or consider, right? Could have asked it that way instead of what part don't you like the most. I don't know if it's necessarily something that we don't like the most. I think, again, usually everyone is trying to give good feedback for healthy improvements. So kind of going on the list here, right, we had Jez mention that, there's a few things that kind of need to be worked on, right? He mentioned, not necessarily liking the thermal towers, working especially with how they worked in Season 2. Right, some servers were able to kind of block other servers by building towers in unopened areas. Right, mentioning that they're something that needs to be scrapped. I agree there completely. I don't think that, to an extent, I don't think that towers should be used in a kind of abusive way. But I do believe that if you are going to spend towers, like let's say you're going to build towers around a city to block, around a city to block them from connecting to it, where they have to go through a tower. If they do 2 or 3 layers worth of towers, right? I think that's okay. But if it's something that's like a glitch or a bug or kind of an unintended use, where it blocks you from building towers at all, like it's an actual glitch, then okay, that's different. If they're putting towers, like I've seen some things where people were putting towers in front of gates and it didn't, before they could, right? So I agree there. I don't believe that you should be allowed to place towers in areas that you do not have clear vision in, right? For example. So I think that if you're looking at a gate, right, or a pass, I really believe you need to capture that pass in order to then get vision granted to you on the other side that allows for you to place a flag down. And if you don't have vision, or if you are not allied with an alliance that has the gate, then you cannot place a flag there, right, on that side of the gate that you're at. I think that would be a good workaround for that. He also mentioned, right, Lily wrote, I know, a great article regarding SVS and kind of the orders of gates. He mentioned that I touched on it too as well. Right, so the function of the towers, and this is something that I mentioned a little bit later, and the order of which the gates open, I think, is essential, right? I think Jez kind of hit that hammer on the head there. Chunhua had mentioned about the strongest server in KVK bracket in terms of alliance power. Also, power we also filled allied with 4 others, right, and kind of decimated by another server patch full of T6s and T7s. So we pulled out of KVK. Having only 2 6s, matchmaking should just kind of be improved in this regard. I agree there with Chunhua. And then Lily mentioning above, right, that kind of protecting everyone's starting zone for a while. And then, kind of once Ymir or the middle is occupied, right, the goal should kind of become like a race to conquer as many server starting zones as possible, right? This is pretty standard for another big kingdom builder that I'm sure some of us play. Mentioning it would allow for some of the fights to last longer, right, instead of it kind of being a week's worth of an experience, right, or at least until those Zone 1 adjacent gates open. Fighting is for 45 days, right, to only receive a few rewards just kind of doesn't make it worthwhile, right? Thinking rewards should be a server base and should be increased to match the value, time, and effort put in. I agree. Thermals are too long to build, too long to deconstruct. It slows down the whole KVK. Now, what I'll say there is I don't know exactly. Again, I wish I had the numbers in front of me to know how long the thermals now take, or if they have always remained the amount that they have been even after some of the KVK updates came in, because I'm blanking right now exactly. I'd have to go and double check. So again, I'm not sure. I'm not sure how long they take or they don't take. Personally, what I will say there is I'm a fan of the thermal towers at least taking a while to build, and I think you can make the argument of saying, maybe they take a little less time to burn down than they do to build, right? I think if you kind of apply like a real life situation to that, right? If you're building a skyscraper, that's going to take a while. But if you knock down the columns on the foundation blocks, I think them crumbling down in a matter of a minute. So and that's not to say that I think, it should only take a minute to deconstruct a thermal tower. But I do think it's okay. I think it's appropriate if the amount of time it takes to deconstruct something is less than the amount of time it takes to build. By how much, right? Maybe you say 50 to 75, 50 to 80% time, something around there, I think might be appropriate. Then Kaneki mentioning that matchmaking in KVK is obviously a glaring issue. Kaneki mentions more on bugs, right? Some of the bugs that came out that affected some of the players' experiences. I think that's obviously really important. And I want to say that I hope that no developer intends for there to be bugs coming into something. But I also, on the other side, understand where people from the community are coming in the hopes and in those hopeful expectations of that these things would be tested before a mode or something is released. And also in that same breath, not without realistic expectations that some things could still happen, right? And then again, my comment here was talking about how, I think some of the most important things is the gate opening sequence, right? I think it really should be, you start off in your zone 1, zone 2 gates open, then zone 3 gates open, then zone 2 adjacent gates open, and then zone 1 adjacent gates open, right? So it should kind of be going all the way to the middle and then coming all the way back. And I think that's how the gate opening sequence should happen. This is pretty standard, at least, again, from another big kingdom builder. And I feel, in some regards, if something isn't broke, right, we shouldn't try to fix it. I'm okay with I shouldn't say it as like that. But what I will say is, I feel that it's, well, maybe I'll just say okay for lack of better words, right? I think it's okay for tests, trials, right? Those types of things to be done. And then wait for feedback if that's really something that they want to do. But I do think in this regard, when you just look at the player participation extremely dropping off after Zone 1 adjacent gates are the first ones to open, that in and of itself is extremely impactful. Then the second thing I talked about here was matchmaking. So I talked about matchmaking and I basically just expanded on this, right? So I sent a screenshot and gave them an example of when I pulled the data for the top 25 strongest kingdoms, and I basically said that they need to that it would be nice if they set it up where it's the strongest 8 servers are in the first group, the strongest 9 through 16 are in the second group, and just do it like that, right? Now, if you need to obviously break that up per season, that's fine, but going off of either who the strongest servers are or whatever metrics, and I just gave an example, whatever metrics you want to use, whether it's median troop power, if it's a medium troop power plus including maybe the 5 or the top 10 strongest troop power players to try and get some averages there. Maybe it's going off of strongest player power, just adding that all up and that kind of being the sum. Whatever factors they kind of use, right? I think doing it in that way, where it's based on kind of this 1-to-1 ratio, instead of doing it where they're kind of manually doing it, where it's like they kind of have this top 4 and bottom 4 to it. I think the easiest way is just, right, think about it. You, as a kingdom, if you're not the strongest server right now, right, your KVK matchup isn't going to be in the strongest group. You're going to be put in a proportionate group based on kingdoms that are around your kingdom strength. That's what everyone really wants at the end of the day. So if you're the strongest server, you should expect to play in the strongest KVK bracket, which is the number 1 bracket, right? This is actually how one of the other kingdom builders used to do it. Love the format, don't know why they changed. And then the third thing I mentioned here is having shorter KVK seasons. I think this is extremely important. 45 days, in my opinion, is too long. I love the duration that trial season had, but I think it could be a little bit longer than that, right? So my proposal was, or my piece of feedback was saying, let's have KVK be 1 month. We do 1 month on, 1 month off. This would allow for you to arguably have up to 6 KVKs a year. I think that's a great way to start for pacing. This is not to say that it should be this forever, but I think that's a great place to start. You have 1 month of KVK, which is a little bit longer than the trial season, I think about 5 days, and then you have 1 month off. This allows for you also to keep up with other interval or rotational events that might go off of a monthly rotation. You have to also think about how you're going to coordinate with other events that might coincide with KVK. So if you have it a month on and a month off, then during that off time, that can be the time where you are able to receive migrants and do your recruiting. It really gives you a good opportunity to plan, recover, recuperate, rebuild, re-strategize, and then recruit and try and get some activity coming in. I actually think it's a healthy thing, right? You got to think about the first week after KVK, you're really debriefing, so to speak, right? And kind of rebuilding, right? You might take a couple days up to a week depending on your level and how many troops you lost at that time, right? If you're fighting all the way up to the end, to kind of regroup and just, kind of re-put yourself back in a good mental space. Then you look at the second week is probably something around planning. You're kind of assessing what had happened, going through some of those motions, probably trying to get in and recruit and get some new players. Third week, you're probably doing a little bit more of that, but maybe getting into some early prep stages. And then that final week, in week 4, you're probably figuring out who your matchup is. So really, you have a solid maybe 2 weeks of in-between downtime. And then you got the 1 week debrief, and then you got the 1 week going into briefing for the next KVK. So I think 1 month on, 1 month off is great. And I'm sure I've already hammered that point home by saying it a few times. All right, then Ray had mentioned, again, matchmaking as well, better endgame rewards that they had mentioned. I think they said cold silver and chests have been the main topic of the community. KVK chests, there was a big hype for KVK immortals like Ragnar, Matilda, Siondiak for all the skills. But after this KVK, right, a lot of that hype is gone. Mentioned the price is excessive, the drop rates for each interesting gadget is low. Some people have kind of lost their hope in some of those new test immortals, or started to test some of those new immortals and skills. So yeah, right. Then this an acknowledgement of really good feedback from the team, and then we get into the 5th question here, which is, and I'm about halfway through. This is probably going to be an hour, so I lied. Someone said it's probably going to be an hour and a half, and I said no. I'm going to try and keep it short, but that's not happening. But I hope you guys appreciate. Again, of course, as I'm not reading everything verbatim, but some things trying just to kind of give you an idea on what everyone suggested, because there's a lot of great stuff that the reps did provide. So they asked, anything new you want to have in KVK? Right, so some people say not new, but to further add, on possibly some of the improvements, right, ideal to kind of complete non-SVS events in Frostland. And that was Jazz. We see Chunhua had mentioned something I want to have in KVK is the ability to block some people in the chat. I will say that, yeah, I think having that opportunity to block people is extremely important. Right, having the ability to kind of do Norheim events in there instead of having to go back and forth. I think that's a big one, in which I know Lily had mentioned as well, saying that, right, kind of, and I thought Lily had really eloquently put this in a really good light, saying that, try to have KVK feel like it's its own server, right, where it has its own events, its own things, where there's not a true need to go back to the home kingdom, right? You want to promote people staying in KVK at least as much as possible, right? And you can't do that if you're opening up adjacent zone 1s a week in, right? Or a week and a half in, whatever it may be. So I think if the gate opening process changes, then yeah, doing these types of things to make KVK feel more like a home and where you can stay here without going back to Norheim, with the exception of things like contentional relics, right? Because that still might be something. Well, I don't know. This is kind of getting into like theory here, right? If they maybe did something where it just maybe just COR carried over until KVK ended, but I don't know. I mean, that could potentially be rough because you're still losing out. So yeah, I'm going to table that or shelf that. So mentioning something like, implementing a KVK King of the Hill, right, could be great. Again, right, these are things we've seen in other games, right? Having kind of like Melina cross events come over, maybe something like a cross KVK power-up event, cross kind of gnome hunting event, right? These are things we've seen in other kingdom builders. I think these are great ideas. And then the last thing Lily had mentioned, which again, taken from other stuff, is, right, doing something like a pre-KVK event competition. Right, some people might be familiar with EOTC, which if you know what that means, you know what game that's from. But doing something like that, where you have some kind of like a competition before KVK starts, where you know who you're matched up against, right? So maybe it's a week before, you have a few days of knowing who you're matched up against, and then for 3 or 4 days before KVK starts, you have this kind of like competition event between all 8 kingdoms before you go into KVK. Maybe there's some awards or something you get from that. That could be really fun, right? A way to also have that 1 month downtime in my suggestion, be a little bit more beneficial, right? Or feel a little shorter, I guess, if you will. And then Kaneki mentioned, again, same thing, having both events there, right? You can see there's a consistent trend. It gets to me, and I had mentioned that having the events in KVK, so I kind of just doubled down and just gave them another hand raise there or another sign off. I think it's a great idea to do. I think having a system that's a little more easier to identify friends and foes was the second point I mentioned. I know they did a little bit of an improvement there from one of the previous updates. But again, if it's not something that has been or even could be improved upon to be a little bit more identifiable, that could be something as well when it comes, because I think it's really important to, if you mark someone as an enemy on your diplomacy board, right? I think it should be something, and I'm not saying you should be able to see them on your mini map or something and just find them immediately fast. But if you're zooming around the map, right, it should be pretty clear who the enemies are. If they're going to give you a system or a way to identify and find them, right, then, just make it clear is all. It doesn't have to necessarily be in big, bold letters, but I think maybe more than just kind of the red bordering, right, that was there previously before one of the updates. Then, again, I kind of doubled down on having that pre-KVK event would be fantastic, that kind of Lily had mentioned. And then my last thing here was me just feeling as though there's not a need for the seasons, right? The whole preparation season 1, I just don't see what the need is, right? And this is my honest feedback here. It doesn't make any sense to me, right? The only reason I've ever seen a season system implemented is if you have a bunch of different KVK maps, right? Where maybe you want kingdoms to stick to certain KVK maps going into their lifespan. But even so, having, you have to think about it, the average new player doesn't care right? They don't really have any feedback to say, oh, well, my first KVK is in this map, right? Another kingdom a year later says, oh, well, my first KVK was on this map. I don't think anyone's going to really complain about that. I know I wouldn't. And so for me, I honestly just think the whole season system just makes, it's just another, in my opinion, it's another hoop to jump through. And in this case, it's more hoops than I think is needed, more hurdles we have to climb. So I think the idea of a season system is kind of cool in theory, but I think in practicality, I don't see a need. I don't see any value, true value or benefit for a season system. But if someone wants to try to explain one to me, please feel free. So Ray, sorry, then we get to Ray, mentioning adding improvements above, being able to do events there. Had also mentioned things like a Battle of Asteria and Frontal Assault, right? I think those are great ideas. Having kind of its own KVK events calendar is a good thing. I actually like that. And then maybe following a KVK story. Saying something kind of like after Conquest is related, right? Maybe humans have won the battle versus the gnomes. Having something. I think they said, let me see, after Conquest, we could start season 1 in a new land. Desert. Oh, I see. So maybe just doing different styles of KVK, whether it's like desert, snow, terrain, average terrain, something like that. Man, my first shot was doing so good. Okay, and then we're good. So now, when it looks like, so let me see here. Okay, so now the next question they had asked here is about the Goddess Festival. So just kind of about Goddess Festival and seasonal events. So some people had gave some things talking about how some of these events are a little overpriced, and right. I think Jez had mentioned some of them were kind of like a slot machine, so to speak, and. Then I think there was also mention of the ability stones, right? Saying that it doesn't come off well when there's a lot of money you have to spend to get those to unlock skills. That just seems kind of disproportionate to other spending areas. And right, so I think an example that was given was that the ability stones do not give a guarantee, and have put a huge burden on some players to spend, right, in order in their minds to try and be relevant, right, or stay relevant by spending maybe 50 over 100K, right? That was mentioned from Jez. So I think something like that is very relatable when you think about having someone that can give you a lot of fantastic insight, right, as a specialist just in that one area, alone from many others, when it comes to spending. Also mentioning things like COR, right, maybe some more immortals added to the shop. I kind of agree there. I think maybe doing some other things with the COR shop, or maybe cycling it, kind of how you do arena, could be cool to do, but something maybe different, or maybe just adding some things to it. Right, giving more of a reason for people to kind of participate in COR, even though I think for the most part, there's already a lot of things that people would participate in COR for, but maybe just making some of the general COR rewards could be something as well. We kind of touch on that a little bit later. Right, just kind of mentioning that the free-to-play base is just as important as everyone. And then let me see here. So I think after Jez, Lily had mentioned. Let me go. Chinhua here had mentioned events that offer something like core immortals. Right, always grab the attention of the free to plays and low spend. Right, can obviously be really attractive. And I think they were mentioning the Triss event, where you spend for artifacts, which also kind of has a layer of RNG. Saying that it kind of deters some people to spending on the event. Lily mentioning it's kind of 50-50 for her, right? Cycling between similar events can sometimes feel a little bit repetitive. Adding kind of new event mechanisms, maybe a bi-weekly or biannual event felt very different. Saying that it was kind of one of her favorites. Goddess event was nearly the same last year, same frame, same city skin. I think we need saying something like maybe some new city skins or frames could be added. Otherwise, they might just become redundant, so to speak. And then mentioning something kind of like allowing for people to wear a cosmetic look. They have unlocked, kind of letting them also pick the buff they unlocked from a dissonance skin, might be a cool approach. And this is something that I've actually mentioned in some videos where I think they could. I think when it comes to the cosmetic space within IK, if you look at when you attach the Shadow Dragon skin, right, your troops have their own skin on them. I think that could be something really cool that IK could dive into in the kind of city skin market. Maybe even having kind of $1 animated emojis, right, that they can do, or 50-cent animated emojis, just things that you can buy that are kind of higher quality emojis. Could be another really cool thing, right? Maybe something would last a few seconds, right? Maybe it lasts a little bit longer. Maybe it does a little more. Maybe it's again, these are other ideas on ways to kind of monetize that do not necessarily affect by giving anyone kind of a power boost or advantage or buff in some way. And then Kaneki mentioning here some of the events have been becoming a little bit more pay to win. As it seems that that's happening more consistent. Again, some mentioning that it was very impactful for the Triss Blessing event. Latest one being the Goddess event. Had mentioned that had been kind of longing a little bit more. Although the skin wasn't changed, mentioning still like the event. And also mentioning there the biannual event was fantastic and good. And then my part here was saying that, like when they did that tree fruit event, right, where everyone in the kingdom had to participate, and everyone in the kingdom could choose a fruit on the tree, and when one person did, it would go away, right? Something like that I thought was such a very creative approach to doing kind of task-based or action-based events. That not only was just you doing and completing all the tasks on your own, but kind of doing it with the group, with the kingdom. I'd love for them to do more stuff like that. And so that was an example of an event that I really liked. Right, so I think something like that. And then I mentioned every player being able to work, and this is something many of you have heard me talk about, right? Every player being able to work hard enough on an event to where they can unlock everything in moderation. For example, if you had top tier, mid tier, and low tier things, I gave an example. Things like Epic Immortals, maybe gated Epic Immortals, Dragon Chest, Epic Schematics, 24-hour speed ups, Epic Optional Chests, right? These could be considered like top tier, so to speak. And then you'd have maybe one of each of these, right? Or maybe two of each of these that you could get. Even though, for example, maybe one is available to you, but then... Because with how they've been doing some of the events, you can see that here's certain chests that, like, here's certain resources in the rewards section for seasonal events that you can get just from unlocking free-to-play materials. And then here's the other section where you have to pay to get these additional gated materials, and then you can also unlock those additional chests. So I think having one of each of any chest you would give to someone who would spend money, you give each of those, you give all of those to the free-to-play, but they have to earn it, and they may only get one of each of the top tier. They get a few of the mid-tiers, which could be something like your Philosopher's Stones, maybe stuff like 8-hour speed-ups, flat gold items, maybe medium optional chests, even though it kind of is the same. And then maybe you have low-tier stuff. That could be your 5-minute, your 1-hour speed-ups, like basic crafting materials, maybe basic optional chests, just things like these, right? Basic resources. Maybe you throw in some 500,000 or 1 mil resources. Those could be things as well. But at least allowing for you to be able to select one of each for top stuff, a few or a good amount of things for mid-tier, right? Maybe somewhere between 3 and 10, and then you can have like 20, 30, or 40, or 50 or more for the low-tier stuff. I think that is something that's really important. They've done a few of these events where they've allowed for every player, if they use some of their resources, some of their AP, right, invest some time, they have been able to unlock everything. And so I'm always a big proponent of that type of system, more so than doing kind of hard gating on certain things where really all you're telling the free-to-play base is what you can't get or what we're not giving you, right? And that's how some players will look at it. Okay, let me see here. Then I think I mentioned... right, having more immortals added to the Triumph of Fate event, right? Because I think so far I'm still seeing Dito and Cyrus there. I haven't seen anyone new. So I think adding some more new people there could be good. Again, why not add Charles? Why not add Baldwin? Why not add Genghis Khan, right, to Triumph of Fate? These immortals have been in the game the longest. And if you think about it, maybe you go off of time. I mentioned this before, right? Maybe when an immortal comes out, you give a 2 to 3, anywhere from like maybe, I don't know, a month to 2 months or something like that, and then they'll show up on Triumph of Fate, or maybe 1 to 3 months. But I think when that happens, right, these immortals should eventually come out. So to me, I don't know why those immortals are not already out, right? And I definitely think some kind of a system like that should be added. Then we get to Ray here is talking about right, the Goddess event and Biennial event I had mentioned were great. And saying that, saying that because it allowed people to have exclusive stuff, for example, non-spenders, right? You could, right? So I think in some regards, being able to get Charles, Khan, and Baldwin, if you had enough green gems saved up, could be, right, you might have been able to get them. But for the people that maybe didn't have those green gems saved up and weren't saving them up, or just may not even think to save green gems up to wait on potential events or on that Monopoly spending event, might have missed out on this as well. So it's just one of those things where if you know an event's coming and an event is consistent, then you'll be prepared to save green gems for it. If you have no idea, right, that's kind of where you can have people feeling a certain type of way. Okay. And talking about ability stones, right, making a way where all people can get those is great and will motivate the community. I agree. Ray also mentions cosmetics, which again, some of us had mentioned as well. I think that's a great add. Right, Immortals, saying Immortals should be accessible for all types of players. And that was kind of where I had mentioned about the Triumph of Fate is just one example. And then we get to the next question here, which is which events you are not interested in or feeling most boring among all. And so, which was funny, it was a little split. Jez and I had mentioned Mysterium because I don't know. I'm glad to see that he feels and others feel like how I feel when it comes to Mysterium. But let me go top down. So Jez had mentioned Mysterium, right? Just kind of doesn't really feel up to par, right? A little boring here and there. I feel more or less the same way. But the rewards can be great. I think especially once you kind of get to the bottom floor, maybe more so than, kind of what the average fight is on the 3 floors leading up. Right, events that kind of just don't justify the RSSUs for the rewards that you get from them. So Chunwa here mentioned about from the free-to-play perspective, right, the wheels are boring, or again, could be improved there. Right, you get 1 free spin a day. Second one, I guess, is Mysterium, about even more annoying as a fire team. I mentioned the training troop event. To be honest, it should be raised to train T5 troops already and lessen the number of troops a bit as it goes up because of the training tier. I think that's good, right? I think certain events have to scale appropriately with the kingdom, where as they scale, more rewards are added. I think that's a great way. I mean, even if you just look simply at something like Intentional Relics. They scale that, right? There's 3 tier rounds that they scale it up for. And then once you get to, I think it's season 2, then they scale it up again, right? Then you have a new 3 tiers levels that you'll scale for. The wall durability goes up 3 times, and then troop power, garrison power goes up as well, along with other cities. Again, something I definitely see. Lily mentions the Triss event, Lucky Spin, Triumph of Fate, Wonderful Journey, Thea's Roulette, right? Are events that you don't really play, you invest some of your gems money items into get some kind of return, right? Kind of more passive and not necessarily actionable, right? Or tangible where you can participate. So saying that we kind of need more events that you can play in and encourage players. And I understand, like, when you're doing Melina and Infernal Assault, right, these are things where you're really going to encourage more player teamwork participation, right, more group participation. Yeah, I think that I think this is something that has again good direction here. Adding some more of those events, even as doing things like, I don't know, capture the flag. Maybe you're escorting a troop or something somewhere. You have to protect it against others, right? And some people might be like, that sounds really familiar. Well, it's because it is. So, Kaneki mentioning here that looking at any of the wheel events for free to play, right? It is hard it's hard to value spending, because if you ask me, like, I've never spent on the wheel event, right? All of my gems go into I consider myself at this point to be somewhat of a mid-ish spender, right? Maybe low mid, and low mid's probably more appropriate. But even me, like, I mean, you've seen me with a lot of gems at times, and even then, I've never spent on the wheel. All of my gems are usually just saved up to use on Wonderful Journey or the Monopoly event, right? Because I feel like I'm going to get the most amount of value out of that event when I spend my gems. I'm getting a return on them. So I don't really see another event, especially if I'm trying to get right to the max chest as well. For me, that's where I'm going to spend mine, right? Now, if there's other events that are going on, at that time that coincide with Wonderful Journey, and let me say this, they could do something where maybe every time Wonderful Journey comes around, they let it coincide with something like a Triumph of Fate, something like a Lucky Spin, a Thea's Roulette, right? One of the wheel events. If you do it that way, then there's more incentive to spend on those types of events, right? Especially if you're looking at it from the free-to-play perspective. Okay, then you get to me. I basically just echoed saying Mysterium. I think Mysterium, if the rewards, maybe if there was a little more gold you could get per the attacks, then kind of once you get to the bosses, if maybe you could get a few more of the schematics possibly at the end. Again, I'm not sure how many people feel that it is a good or a low amount. I maybe feel you could do a little bit more. I'm not saying a lot, but maybe just doing something where you can have Mysterium be a little bit more engaging. I think if you just raise some of the reward tiers or amounts that you can get, that may help people participate a little bit more. I wish I had more time for Mysterium. I'll be honest, I rarely participate in Mysterium, though I know I need to. Let me clarify that so I can call myself out as well. Then I had mentioned more events that engage everyone in the kingdom and the alliance, right? So kind of hitting on what Lily mentioned, right? Kind of just more events that engage everyone, especially for those in your alliance. And then Ray, we have says COR kind of feels like an obligation. Some people do it because they need to let some people in, right? Changing some of the rewards might optimize and make that a little bit better. Mysterium, right? Saying kind of most people find it boring, either running on auto run or and mentioning, hey, can we add a feature that says auto run or insta run for a reasonable price? Oh man, I guess that really hammers it home there. Right, saying that things like Infernal Assault and Battle of Hysteria are their favorite. So I can see that. So then they say, thank you for these. And so now we kind of get into our sequence questions, right? So we're kind of getting to the end now. And I'm already at an hour and 4 minutes. But again, I hope you enjoy me kind of going through a lot of these things, right? Some of these things I'm reading a little bit line for line. Other things trying to kind of give you the highlight overview. So now we get into the stage of where they're asking questions based on, they're asking for us to ask any questions we want to ask, right? This could be anything. And so Lily had mentioned asking a question here from the Korean community, just on some of the spenders, right? Asking about, maybe having like a one-click purchase all for daily bundles, right? So I think an example of this would be, and I'll show you this in game, if you were to go to, let's say, special bundles, and let's just say I just wanted to max purchase Immortal promotion. So there's a button here that says like one-click buy, and then it says what that amount is. Or better yet, it's one-click buy, and then you click it, and then it'll take you to a screen that shows you what that amount is. So, and don't get me wrong, I think that's a great idea, right? You have to think about it from a spender's viewpoint. Right? If I can save the amount of time that I'm spending on something to get everything that I'm going to get anyways, if I individually click the things to buy, right, it saves me time, right? Which means in turn, right, they might feel better, might make the game a little bit more money too as well. So I don't actually see a problem with that. I actually think it makes sense when you look at it from an efficiency standpoint. Talking about something was mentioned about offering kind of like a cashback discount, right, to promote spending, where if you do a one-click buy all, right, maybe you'll get an extra voucher ticket or something, right? Maybe you'll get a discount on your next purchase, something like that. I actually don't think that's necessarily maybe a bad idea. You kind of have to almost look at it as, and I say that just being open to it, not that I think maybe it should be 100% included, but I understand where they're coming from, where it's almost like on the free-to-play side, if you log in every day for 30 days, or if you're logged in for 6 or 10 hours straight, you get those additional online reward timers, right? A spender might not be able to be on the game for 6 or 7 hours a day, like maybe some other people are, where they can just kind of leave it open. So again, I think that in and of itself, right, obviously if it's not, again, they're already spending a lot anyways, but I think the fact is doing something like that, if it is not, where it's like, yeah, we're going to give you a 10% kickback on everything you spend. Well, you spend, $100,000, that's 10 grand. I don't know. That seems like a lot to me. But if it's a percentage or something, maybe it's 1 to 3%, maybe one. I don't even know if I'd say 1 to 5. I don't know. I would say 1 to 3% kind of kickback on things if you were to do kind of a one-click spend. That's just my thought on it. But let me know what you think there. And then we have. And then the response there, right? This is the 1-for-1 ratios now, right? So the response here was, right, kind of good question that was taken into consideration, right? So, and just mentioning that some of the platforms may not support that specific action, but again, something that that they would take into consideration there. And then Shoutout had mentioned, right, are there any plans to kind of halt the increase of building levels? And this is obviously the big one here during Conquest of Season for KVK. And so the answer here was that it doesn't seem at the moment that there are any plans to halt it. They are discussing it, and they are planning to release, it looks like, some speed ups to help in the following patch, to help kind of the behind servers grow a little bit more. And they also mentioned that they are currently analyzing data as well from the Season 2 KVKs, right? So it looks like there's a few areas there that they are actively looking at and researching. So I appreciated that recognition, that acknowledgement, even though, yeah, it'd be hard for them. And I understand it, again, I would have no expectations of assuming or thinking that they're just going to come out with these kinds of immediate changes. But I appreciate that they're willing to listen and at least hear the feedback as well. And I thought everyone did a great, respectable job of that as well when they were giving their pieces. So that was the answer there. And then the next question here came in from Kaneki, who said, would it be possible for you to give extensive patch notes prior to the release of the update? I am all in favor for this. I think everyone is, right? Just more detailed patch notes, more expansive patch notes that just kind of dive into some more of the specifics. And so the answer there was that, yeah, they said they're going to try to bring more details in the patch notes. So again, appreciated the acknowledgement there. And let me also say that keep in mind, right? Unless you hear me say that something is like an absolute confirmation, right? Remember to kind of take those things with a grain of salt, more open-ended, right? The feedback that we're receiving isn't meant to be a blanket yes or no. It's meant to be, hey, thanks for hearing us out. We appreciate if you can give us a little bit more information or an answer. Cool. If it's just a matter of you appreciating and taking the feedback, again, I'm expecting these types of responses. This is not unrealistic. This is well within reason, and it should be our realistic expectations as well for that. Okay, excuse me. Then we ended up getting to. Let me see what the next question was here. So, then we get to Lily's question, which is, would IK consider moving some of the pay-to-win exclusive towards free-to-play content after a certain time? Example, King of the Hill Immortals become available, right? We mentioned this. Basically the same thing, right? Kind of going to Triumph of Fate. And the response here was, that they have put some of the Immortals into Fate of Tyrion. I don't know if that's Triumph of Fate, but maybe that's just the way they know it. It looks like they also mentioning that we also plan for some new events for all players to lower the difficulty to get the Immortals, including the KVK Immortals. So that was actually nice to hear, and I will say that was pleasant to hear when it comes to the acknowledgement of just making them a little bit more accessible. Then we get to my question, which is, again, you guys know me. My biggest things really are about quality of life. I think quality of life arguably are the most important things that we need to really look at, because, and I'm going to point this out, the number one thing that every player does when they log in is, outside of doing your dailies, you usually will check in some way, shape, or form on if a King's Mail was sent, if an Alliance Mail was sent, checking in on your chats where you DM'd, is there any drama or just news going on? Maybe you check your Kingdom Discord. And what this gets to is your daily life, right? Your daily life playing the game outside of whatever modes or pieces of content or events that are coming up. Your daily life is what impacts, for the most part, your playing experience. Whether you keep playing or you stop playing, you move servers, move alliances, lower your activity, etc. And to me, these are some of the most important things, right? An example of that is, you're a brand new player and you play in a server and that server is in Civil War and you're getting attacked a couple times every day. For a new player, that's going to be a turnoff. And some of the things, right, you may not be able to necessarily combat, but some of them you can. Some are controllable and some are uncontrollable. So some of the things I had mentioned here was, and I had linked them to like a big long list of this, but I provided a couple examples here, which is, for example, increasing King's Mail and Alliance Mails to 2,000 characters. I think that is a must. Right, using the Alliance Mail format that we see where you have the subject line, the body message, then you click send, right? That should be basically just mimicked and emulated over to the King's Mail system. I think showing daily, preferably, but I would settle for weekly, reports of Kingdom activity, where the king gets those reports. So that it would, for example, it would show you how many hyper and active players. It doesn't have to show you names, just a number, how many hyper and active players are currently in the kingdom total, right? So it gives you an individual number and then a combined number of that. That would be so amazing to see as well. Right, and then we have, right, and then you could also have a number of saying like, hey, here's just how many players there are total, excluding people that have not logged into their account, let's say for 7 to 30 days or something, right? It would maybe give you a total number as well. That could be something I think would be great. Right, so you can see how many total members have touched the account, and then how many of those members are specifically hyper and active. Because you could almost bundle silent and present status players kind of almost into the same category to an extent. Right, I mentioned ability to view alliance officers when someone clicks on an alliance, if not even just being able to view all the members, right? Very similar to how a member within an alliance can go in and click members and they can see the ranks, do the drop down and see all the players. Having a friends system implemented, I think would be great, where you can maybe add a player from any kingdom and you have the option to message a player from any kingdom without having to make an account there. And then the other thing I mentioned was like a group chat system outside of alliance groups. Being able to create regular, general, or if you want to refer to them as custom groups after you have people added. And you can do that game-wide within your kingdom, internally, or externally outside of your kingdom. I think that would have amazing benefits beyond I think probably what most may think they would. And then the response I got was, they have done some improvement on Alliance and Kingdom managed tools, and they're still planning to keep working on it. They did say thanks for the specific suggestions, right? They're going to take them into consideration. I appreciate it. Okay. So then we get to Ray. This question is, there any possibility to change the way ability stones are obtained and make it easier? So they said that when they design the skills, right, they are strong and useful. That they also provide different ways to get those ability stones in KVK shop. We also provide 2 different ways to gain the stones. But they did acknowledge they have been receiving some feedback about the stones, and they are discussing. And then Lily asked, and this is, I think, the last one. I'm actually an hour and 15 minutes. So whoever said I was going to be here for an hour and 30 minutes, no, I'm getting attacked. I'm going to garrison. I don't know if this is going to work. Let me see. 213. Okay, I'm probably going to lose. That's okay. I could invest a little bit more, but I'll just take some honor there. Okay. Next thing is, here is, I hate that person. No, Miss Jockey, I love you so much. So then I think Lily had mentioned here, right, it's a lot, kind of giving 2 reference points here on a player in 57 had spent like 600,000 gems to get 2 abilities. Someone mentioned Boss Baby spent like 5 million gems to do max 999 boxes, but they were not even able to unlock Ragnar. And then kind of just asking, what is that general intended price, right? What's the price for the value? And the response here, I thought, was what was actually appropriate for what the I guess the expectation is, so to speak. So here is, oh gosh, what was it? I'm trying to think. Sorry, here it is. So I had to find my place here. So they mentioned that the extraction of chests is a problematic event, or the problem you mentioned may occur in extreme cases. They did say that they will look to improving the mechanism, right, so players can get the things in a reasonable way, right? So I appreciated the acknowledgement there because I did think that it was appropriate, right, given what we heard. Okay, and then here, Mr. Chunwa had mentioned, right, is it possible to scale CR, right? Is it possible to scale CR, right, for CR Relic, World Heart Strength, based on things like how many T67s, activity levels, things like that? And then the response was, right, that they have received feedback on COR, right? They will do some, it looks like they're going to look into doing some adjustments for some of the following releases. So that actually seems like something they have been getting a lot of feedback, or a good amount of feedback on, to kind of give us that response. Kaneki asked, could you consider increasing the rewards for capturing nodes, contention relics? Right now, the response here is, now we put most part of the scores, it looks like, for the honor, because we think that when capturing nodes is also part of it. We don't plan on this as of now, but they did mention they'll keep an eye on it, and if necessary, they'll do some changes. And I think this is important. Like, I actually like that this person gave a little bit more of a detailed reply, where they mentioned that, their expectation is more of that they had intended for the purposes to be used in a way where it focuses on the expectation, right? And this is why I think this is a really big and great response from this person, because they're giving us insight into what their thought process was when they designed this feature, is that they were expecting and anticipating people to fight for these things, right? But this goes back to what I was saying, is that the way that the developers may have intended for something to be used may not be the way that the majority of the kingdoms are using it in. And part of this comes from, and I think this is such a bigger point that I know I don't have enough time to touch on right now, but this is why I think it's so important that, right, if you are, and I'm not, obviously, this is not a slight towards the developers or a call out in any way, but I will just say in general, it is really important that if you play the game and you play it, and you've played in multiple kingdoms, or even just in a kingdom for a while, and you participate in all these events, right, regardless of you going out and doing research in other kingdoms, if you've played in different levels different tier levels, whether it's like a member, officer, lead, department manager, maybe server, project lead, whatever it may be, right? It can also help give you deeper insights and more understandings of these types of things that happen within the game. So this is something where I extremely appreciate the feedback here. What I will say is that though it's great to hear the intended purpose, I will say that the majority of the kingdoms are not treating it like that, at least as of now, right? And I think that in and of itself kind of calls for that change, so to speak, or at least for the recognition of that, and maybe if some tweaking could happen too as well, that could be a great thing. And then I get to my question here, which is talking about how, man, I hope I'm getting some decent honor for this, though. Let me double check here. Ooh, nobility promotion. Thanks, baby. What am I getting here for this? I'm getting, man, I'll take 5,000. I mean, I'm not attacking people, but I can get some honor. Hang on, let me just do a little heal up here. I know I got to use some speed ups, but I don't usually have a lot of opportunities to get honor because I don't really attack people. But I will say, great chance for me here. Shieldman, where's my shieldman? Speed up. All right, cool. Okay, and then my second question here, I actually talked about server merging, and I know this is somewhat of a touchy subject for people, but it is important that, and I want to give people some prefacing here, right? I think that server merging, I asked them, first and foremost, I asked, is there any consideration on the possibility of server merges? I mentioned as far as, even if it's just being a discussion to start, right? Kind of going over the pros and cons, how it could work, what the benefits would be. And I mentioned that I feel really confident in being able to make a good case for how that process could be and how doing server merges could actually be more of a win, more of a pro than a con, right? Contrary to popular belief. And let me see here. Then the response I got was saying that they don't have a plan at the moment, right, to do server merges, as there's many factors that may affect this. And the thing was, and this is actually something where they gave me a response saying like one of the challenges that they face. And so they said that there are many factors that this could affect. One of those being it's hard to say if all the members in the server want to go to another one. Right. And I completely agree. I understand that that's a hard thing to ask. So what I did is I then, right, in my BN fashion, right, because I think it's really important that we have to uphold a high standard here. I thought to myself, okay, this person gave me one of their problems that they feel would have to be solved. So I went into problem solver mode, right? Bam, let me hit you with some of that good in the hood. Okay, hang on one sec. Let me restock real quick. Right? I know I'm going over where people are like, why is he doing all this? But you know what? I'm getting some honor from it, okay. 205, am I good? All right, cool. I mean, I got to be almost dead here, right? Oh, man, it's going to be a while. Okay, so what I then went to go and do is I responded and I said, okay, I understand, right, the challenge in any low activity or kind of dying server is that the boat kind of already has a water leak, right? So it's always going to keep leaking over time and over time. You're going to keep losing more and more people, right? Meaning that more and more players will either migrate out, right? They'll stop playing the game altogether, right? And then you might have a situation where you have some hardcore players that are left. An example of this would be like server 1. Server 1's the oldest server, but you still have a dedicated core group of people, even though being a small amount, that still play there. And so I said, okay, here's 2 creative ways that I feel those things can be addressed. So I had said number 1 was that they could, Shieldman Bowman, I know everyone's like, what's this guy doing? Stop fighting this. Read me the information. I need more Bowman. Okay, I feel better now with my life. So the 2 creative options I had presented was, oh God, where is it here? Sorry, was 1, you can have active alliance leaders or the king choose to opt in or opt out for consideration on saying, yes, we would all love for our kingdom to be opted in for a server merge opportunity. Then you can take all the kingdoms that also opt in under the same circumstances, as long as they meet a certain, like if they're below a threshold, right, below a certain activity threshold on either a general player activity or maybe multiple other metrics. And so from there, then you would look at all those servers and then look at how you would do some merges. right, to then meet minimums. It doesn't mean that you're going to turn all these servers into super servers. No. But you will meet some minimums, right? An example of this could be saying, okay, well, let's look at all the servers that are out there, and then let's look at what the average hyper and active player is, like the player activity, right? Predominantly going off of hyper and active present status players, right, in a kingdom. Let's look at what that number is, and then let's go about half of that number or 2/3 of that number, and that's the number we want to hit for minimum activity in a server, right? Just as an example, right? And again, you can work that. And the second option I got, which I thought was really creative, like I was really on it right now. I also have a Jimmy Neutron brain blast. So, and then the second thing here is, and I'm totally going to hit an hour and a half. So whoever said that, if you're still watching, you were right. So the second part here is, right, players in a kingdom that, right, so you basically have every player in the kingdom that's active, right, that is probably above a certain castle level because you don't want it to be inflated, is you would say all the players in a kingdom can then select. So individual players, maybe they get a system mail, and that system mail says, hey, do you opt in or opt out for, or maybe it's a king's mail, right, that they send out. Maybe it's a button they click and they say, hey, let's do an opt-out test or something. And then you say, okay, well, how many people, or sorry, then you allow each individual active player to say, okay, I opt in or I opt out. Then if you have a majority, like a 51%, the majority vote, yeah, let's opt in for the server merge, then you know that the majority of the players in a kingdom are okay with doing a server merge. And that's the second way you can potentially look to get it, right? So just something to consider when you look at, when you're looking at how you could do something like this, and then with me providing what I thought were just very creative and good solutions to that. And then the response I got was that from that is, I will bring this to the team and take these and take this to a discussion, right? Just into maybe consideration, but at least to a discussion. And I was like, okay, cool, right? So we had what I thought was a really good back and forth there, right? It was, I presented something, they presented some obstacles they felt, I provided some creative troubleshooting options on how to maybe work within that or get around it, and then they acknowledged and said, you know what, these are some things that we'll take in discussion. So awesome to see. And then we get to, who was the next person here? Where's Ray Ray? I think that actually might have, Ray Ray asked, right, from the Spanish community, what expectations do the dev team have for Infinity Kingdom in the long term? Kind of a general question, but let me see what the response was here. Is that, right, we want to build a great game for the players, making a great gaming experience and growing for the whole community. Okay. Honor. Okay. And I think that's it. Yeah, so that's it. So again, I pretty much covered everything that was discussed. So if you have been here listening to this as a podcast, probably the best thing I could say. But I really wanted to give you a full breakdown, right? Because I think for the people, I don't know how many, but I will say for however many you are that are on the fence, because let's just be honest and be candid, there are some players who were looking forward to this meeting and how these things would play out, questions that were asked, responses that were given. And I understand that not everything is going to be, right now we're kind of getting into my conclusion portions here. I also understand not everything is going to be addressed. This is what I consider to be an introductory meeting. I have no unrealistic expectations that, everything is going to get figured out right now in this 3-hour plus meeting, right? We're going to give them stuff. They're just going to be like, yeah, we're just going to go ahead and implement it. No. That's not how it works. And I understand that, I think, as much as everyone that was here understands that. And I hope you at home understand that as well, right? That's just not realistic for expectations that we should have when we are having these types of conversations. I think the most that we can hope for is having a good, healthy dialogue and discussion, which I will say the meeting went better than I expected. And that's first and foremost. Number two, it was great to hear from a few different people from the employees, and I did appreciate that. Number three, I think the format worked out a little better than I anticipated, right? And I don't actually think it was a poor format. I think it was a good format for one version, one variation of it. So I think that worked out well. The fourth thing I will say is that, again, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to come up in the future. I do not expect anything that we talked about to be added or included in the next update. I would say that at the earliest, things may be added, and this would be the 2.0 update. Let's say the 2.1 update, right, would be where I would maybe look to see at soonest where some of these things might be considered, might be implemented or added in. Again, I know that doesn't necessarily answer some of the big questions, right? Even if you think about the amount of people that had signed off for the 4 big things that we had covered, that Lily had made, that myself and Jez had kind of helped work on when it comes to the C40, the artifacts, kind of the gated immortals. I think those were 3. I'm sure, man, I feel so bad. I'm sure I'm missing one here. But just on those things, right, it doesn't really kind of give us any answers there, but the opportunity to give that feedback, right, from, what we hope they consider to be, in the know, valuable representatives to speak on these things for the community, I hope that is a big first step, or at least a good first step, right? So that's where I'm at right now. I will say overall, I think that the meeting, as I said, went better than expected. And in addition, I'll give you a kind of final special piece here, is that they did say that they will be looking to try and hold future meetings going forward. And I think everyone here was respectable. Everyone answered in a timely manner. So again, I have a good impression walking away from the meeting saying that, like I said, I think it went well. And if there are opportunities for future meetings, as they had mentioned themselves as well from the team, that gives me some good hope. Now, I'm not going to necessarily say that I am now all of a sudden over the fence and I feel 100% great about where we're at. No, of course, I think things are still up in the air. But I do think this is at least at minimum a good stepping stone. I think the cautions and the cautionary optimism that anyone has, is probably still warranted. Because like I said, right, we don't know what's going to happen, right? There is the unknown out there. But I do like the direction that the meeting went in and what I took away, and I hope what some of my other representative colleagues took away from the meeting as well. So again, I would love to hear what you guys think in the comments down below. I know this is a long one, but I hope that you appreciate, and I don't mean like you need to appreciate, but I hope for those of you that have sat through this for as long as you have, because even here, it's been me an hour and a half just talking in this recording, right? Because I can't show you anything. But I hope that I hope that there at least is a level of appreciation for me, whether it was reading some of the things, some amount verbatim, and then other things giving you highlighted versions of kind of what was talked about. Because again, this was approved that we could say. And again, right, I think this is like the best version that someone would be able to do, right? Which is one of the reasons why I did this in about half the time of the meeting, which I hope maybe I could have went through it a little bit faster. But if anything, that is it for me. I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know anything and everything you are feeling in the comments down below. And of course, as more updates come out, if they do, I will be sure to be here to bring those to you guys in the quickest and most relevant amount of time. All right, I'll catch you later.